9 men looked at you and walked away. What makes you think I'll be any different?" Clara Whitmore didn't flinch. She didn't look down. She looked that man straight in the eye and said, "Because you asked." He walked away anyway. That was rejection number 9. 27 years old. No family, no land. Nothing left but a worn suitcase and a name Silver Creek had already made up its mind about. But the very next morning, the richest cowboy in Montana Territory rode into town, walked past every younger, prettier woman on that platform, and stopped directly in front of her. Subscribe to follow Clara's story, and tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Clara Whitmore had learned a long time ago that the world does not slow down for a woman in pain. It doesn't pause when she's tired. It doesn't soften when she's already been knocked down. It just keeps moving the horses, the merchants, the gossip, the seasons, all of it rolling forward, whether she was ready or not. So she had learned to keep moving too. That was the only thing she knew how to do. But standing at the Silver Creek Bride Selection platform, on the morning of her 10th appearance, wearing the same brown dress she had worn 9 times before, Clara felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Doubt. Not the small kind. Not the quiet kind that whispers and retreats. The deep kind. The kind that sits down inside your chest and refuses to leave. What if they were right? What if you really are too much? She pressed her hand flat against her coat pocket, feeling the edges of the folded letter inside. Her credentials. Her references. Her history summarized on 2 pages, everything she had built and survived, reduced to something a stranger could glance at and hand back in under 30 seconds. She had watched 9 men do exactly that. She pressed harder against the pocket. Not yet, she told herself. Not yet. The town of Silver Creek, Montana Territory in the summer of 1886 was not a gentle place. It was loud in the mornings, freight wagons and cattle drives, and the hammer sound of the new telegraph office being expanded on the eastern side of Main Street. It was dusty in the afternoons, when the wind came down from the hills and turned everything the color of old bone. And in the evenings, it smelled like wood smoke and horse, and the particular sharpness of men who had worked too hard and bathed too little. Clara had been living at Mrs. Dowell's boarding house for 3 weeks. She had arrived with $22 a suitcase and the name of a contact, a Mr. Harold Fitch, who ran the bride placement service out of a small office beside the feed store. Mr. Fitch was a nervous man with ink-stained fingers and a habit of apologizing before he delivered bad news. He had apologized to Clara 8 times. The 9th time, he simply slid a fresh placement form across the desk and said, "There's another selection day next Thursday." She took the form. She filled it out. She showed up. Because what was the alternative? Go back to the farm that had already been sold to cover debt. Return to a life that had quietly ended while she was still standing in the middle of it. Numb. Clara had nowhere to go back to, which meant the only direction available was forward. The platform itself was a raised wooden structure about 4 feet off the ground, positioned in front of the sheriff's office, so the proceedings could remain orderly. There were usually 8 to 12 women standing on it during a selection day. Some were young, barely 20. Some had come from as far as Ohio or Tennessee. Some were widows. Some had never been married. Clara was always the oldest woman on the platform. She was 27 years old, which in Silver Creek's frontier arithmetic made her approximately 10 years past the point of easy interest. The other women on the platform that morning were kind enough to her. Polite the way people are polite when they feel a little sorry for you, but don't want to say so directly. A girl named Millicent, maybe 19 years old with copper-colored hair, had offered her a biscuit from her lunch pail before the proceedings started. "You nervous?" Millicent asked. "No," Clara said. That was half true. She wasn't nervous about the men. She was nervous about herself, about the possibility that she had finally run out of the stubborn endurance that had carried her this far. "I heard about last Thursday," Millicent said carefully. "Mr. Dowd." Clara nodded once. Millicent didn't push further, which Clara appreciated. What had happened with Mr. Dowd, the 9th man? The one who had handed her letter back in front of the whole crowd had made the rounds through every boarding house and saloon in Silver Creek within 24 hours. People in small frontier towns have very few entertainments, and a public rejection of that particular variety was considered news. She had heard the comments. She ought to give it up. 27 with a failed farm and no family. What exactly is she offering? Some women just aren't made for marriage. Clara had let every word of it pass through her like cold water. She was still standing. That was the only thing that mattered. By 9:30 that morning, 5 men had made their selections. Clara watched each interact the way she used to watch weather moving across the farm fields with careful, unsentimental attention. She had learned to read these moments quickly. A man who walked up with his chest forward and his eyes already moving past you was looking for a trophy. Not a partner, not a person. A visual confirmation of his own success. A man who spent the first 30 seconds asking about your father or your brothers was looking for a transaction. He wanted to know who he was buying from. A man who glanced at your hands. First your hands was looking for a worker. He needed labor wrapped in a domestic arrangement. Clara had nothing against any of these men individually. She understood the mathematics of frontier survival. She understood that many of them were practical people making practical calculations in a practical place. She just wasn't willing to be calculated. She had spent years managing an entire farm alone, negotiating with creditors who thought her late father's debts were her inheritance, working alongside men twice her size, who doubted her every morning and begrudgingly respected her every evening. She had earned the right to ask for more than calculation. She just wasn't certain on this particular morning that this particular town was going to give it to her. 2 more men passed her by. 7 total. She kept her chin level. She kept her hands still. She breathed slowly. And then the sound of horses changed. It started as a distant rumble, the kind that comes from organized movement rather than a single rider. Clara heard it before she saw it, felt it in the boards beneath her feet. A rhythmic percussion that grew louder and more deliberate as it approached from the north end of Main Street. The crowd noticed. People stopped their conversations. Heads turned. A man near the front of the gathering said something to the person beside him that Clara couldn't hear, but she watched his expression shift from ordinary morning ease into something closer to alertness, almost respect. Then she saw them. A group of riders, 7 or 8 at least, coming down the center of Main Street at a controlled pace, not rushing, not showing off, just moving with the particular confidence of people who have never had reason to hurry because the world generally waits for them. The man at the front was tall in the saddle. He wore a dark coat that had seen weather but had been well maintained, the kind of coat that tells you its owner respects his possessions without being precious about them. His hat was pulled low enough that Clara couldn't read his face until he slowed his horse to a stop at the edge of the platform area. He was not young, mid-40s, she estimated, maybe 42, a face that had spent years outdoors, not weathered in the damaged sense, but marked layered, the kind of face that has gathered its history honestly. Someone behind Clara whispered, "Nathaniel Carter." She felt the name move through the crowd before she heard it spoken a second time, a third time, rippling outward from the platform like a stone dropped in still water. Carter. She knew the name. Everyone in Silver Creek knew the name. Nathaniel Carter owned 40,000 acres of grazing land north of town. He ran 3,000 head of cattle. He employed more men than the town's 2 largest businesses combined. He had built his operation from a single inherited quarter section into the largest ranch in Montana Territory, and he had done it in under 15 years. He had also been a widower for 6 years. He had never once appeared at a bride selection day. The crowd was perfectly unusually silent. Nathaniel Carter stepped down from his horse. He handed the reins to one of his riders without looking back, a gesture so practiced it was unconscious. He straightened his coat. He looked at the platform. Not at one woman on it. At all of them. Clara watched him work through his assessment. She had enough experience with capable men to recognize when someone was genuinely evaluating a situation rather than performing the act of doing so. He was not looking for the prettiest face. He was looking for something else, something she couldn't name from 20 feet away. His gaze moved steadily down the row, past the copper-haired Millicent, past the young widow from Tennessee, past 3 other women. Clara had watched receive morning interest from the men who had already departed, and then his gaze stopped. Clara realized in the half-second before she was absolutely certain that it had stopped on her. Nathaniel Carter walked toward her. The crowd inhaled as a single body. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. Up close, his eyes were a dark, steady gray, the color of sky before a serious storm, not threatening, but carrying the weight of what they'd witnessed. "Clara Whitmore," he said. His voice was low, not performing, not projecting for the audience. Speaking directly to her. She met his eyes without flinching. "Yes," she said. "I'm Nathaniel Carter. I'd like to speak with you privately if you're willing." She heard someone on the platform behind her make a small sound, surprise, or maybe envy. She heard a man in the crowd say something she didn't catch. She heard the ordinary noise of Silver Creek morning, continuing around the extraordinary silence that seemed to have formed in the space between herself and this man. "All right," she said. They walked to the side of the sheriff's building, away from the platform and the crowd, close enough to Main Street that it was perfectly proper, far enough that their conversation was their own. Nathaniel Carter turned to face her directly. He did not open with pleasantries. He said, "I've heard about the 9 rejections." Clara felt something tighten in her chest. She kept her face even. "Most of the territory has apparently," she said. "I'm not bringing it up to embarrass you," he said. "I'm bringing it up because I want to know why you kept coming back." She considered him for a moment. Most men who had spoken to her on that platform had asked about her age, her family background, her domestic experience. Nobody had ever asked her why she kept returning. "Because I haven't found what I came for," she said. "And what did you come for?" "A real partnership," she said. "Someone who wants a person beside them, not a function." He studied her face. "That's a careful answer," he said. "It's an honest answer." "What's the difference?" "Careful means I chose the words to manage your reaction," she said. "Honest means I chose the words because they're true. The reaction isn't my responsibility." Something shifted in his expression. Not softness exactly. More like recognition. "The accounts review you did on the Morrow place before they sold," he said. "Henderson told me about it. He said you found 3 seasons of miscalculated supply costs in under 2 hours. She hadn't expected that. "I helped Mrs. Morrow understand her financial position before she negotiated the sale," Clara said. "I wasn't employed to do it. She was a friend." "You did it because it needed doing." "Yes." "Why do you know how to read farm accounts?" "Because someone had to," she said. "After my father died, the alternative was losing everything to debt we could have managed with proper records." "How old were you?" 17. "And you managed it alone?" "I managed it with 2 seasonal workers and a great deal of stubbornness," she said. "But yes, mostly alone." He was quiet for a moment. Not uncomfortable quiet, thinking quiet. She had learned the difference. "I have a problem at Carter Ranch," he said finally. "A serious one. The kind I've had difficulty explaining to the men around me, because the moment I start describing it, they hear a problem with the books and they stop listening." "What kind of problem?" "Numbers that should match and don't," he said. "Supply invoices that arrive in duplicate with slightly different totals each time. Payments going to accounts I can't trace back to any services I remember authorizing." Clara felt something sharpen in her attention. "For how long?" "I started noticing it 8 months ago," he said. "But looking back at the pattern, it may have been running for nearly 2 years." "That's a significant amount of money." "Yes," he said. "It is." "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "You don't know me." "Henderson told me about the Morrow accounts," he said. "And I've watched you on that platform for the last 40 minutes. You didn't change your posture when the other men walked past. You didn't try to perform for me when I approached. And when I told you I knew about the 9 rejections, you didn't apologize for them." "Why would I apologize for being rejected?" "Most people would," he said. "They'd try to explain it away, soften it. Give me a reason to discount it as someone else's mistake." "It was someone else's mistake," Clara said flatly. But that's not the same as requiring an apology from me. He studied her again with that measuring storm-gray gaze. I'm not looking for a social arrangement, he said. And I'm not looking for a woman to sit at the head of my table and look correct at dinner parties. I have a ranch that needs managing, a financial problem that needs solving, and a considerable amount of land that needs someone who actually understands what it means to work. And you think that's me? I think you might be, he said. I'd like to find out. You're proposing courtship. I'm proposing honesty, he said. Come to Carter Ranch, see what it is and what it needs. If you find it's not what you want, you're free to leave. If I find you're not the person I believe you might be, I'll tell you directly. Clara was quiet. She thought about 9 men. She thought about 9 mornings of standing on that platform with her chin level and her hands still. She thought about $22 and a suitcase and the folded letter in her coat pocket. And she thought about the specific quality of Nathaniel Carter's gaze, the way it had moved across the platform, looking for something, and stopped when it found her. Not because she was the prettiest woman there. Not because she was the youngest. Not because she smiled the most invitingly. But because of something she had not yet fully understood. All right, she said. Carter Ranch was a full day's ride north of Silver Creek. Clara made the journey the following morning in the company of 2 of Nathaniel's ranch hands, a quiet man named Thomas and a younger one who introduced himself as Pete, and spent most of the ride trying to make conversation until Thomas told him firmly to let the lady think. She appreciated Thomas. She spent the ride watching the land. This was something she had always done, not for aesthetic reasons, though the Montana Territory landscape had a particular kind of beauty that lived in scale rather than detail. She watched land because land told you things, the way it drained after rain, where the soil was dark and where it had been depleted, which hillsides held morning frost longest, where the water ran during a hard season and where it disappeared. Nathaniel's land told her things from the first mile. The grazing rotation was good, but not optimal. She could see it in the grass patterns. The fence lines along the east section had been repaired recently, which was right, but the posts were set shallower than they should have been for a hard winter. The creek that ran through the lower quarter was healthy, clean bank lines, steady flow, even in the summer dry. This was a good operation run by a man who understood cattle. But it had grown faster than its management systems had kept up. She could see that clearly. When they arrived at the main house, Nathaniel met them in the yard. He looked at her with that same direct, appraising attention. How was the ride, bae? Educational, she said. What did you learn? Your east fence line will need resetting before October, she said. The posts are shallow. A hard freeze and a cattle press at the wrong moment, and you'll lose 50 yards of fence line in a single night. He was quiet for a beat. Thomas, he said, ride the east section tomorrow. Check the post depths. Thomas nodded without comment. Nathaniel looked back at Clara. Come inside, he said. I'll show you the records. The ranch office was a room at the back of the main house. A large desk, 2 windows, shelving stacked with ledger books and supply invoices and correspondence in various states of organization. It was not a disaster, but it was not orderly in the way a serious operation required. Clara set her coat over the back of a chair and picked up the nearest ledger. She worked for 3 hours. Nathaniel sat across the room reading correspondence, answering when she asked questions and otherwise staying out of her way. She appreciated that too. Most men would have hovered, explained, inserted themselves into the process to remind her that it was their process, their domain, their permission that allowed her presence. Nathaniel simply worked beside her, as though 2 people working in the same room was the most natural thing in the world. At the end of the 3 hours, Clara set down the ledger she was holding and looked across the room at him. You have a problem, she said. Tell me. Someone has been submitting invoices for supply deliveries that either didn't occur at full value or didn't occur at all, she said. The pattern started 22 months ago. It's systematic, never large enough to trigger immediate suspicion, but consistent. I estimate you've overpaid somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000. The room was very quiet. Can you prove it? Not yet, she said. Not with what's here. but the pattern is clear. If I can compare these records against the actual supply delivery logs, the ones your foreman would have signed at point of delivery, I can show you exactly where the discrepancy sits. The foreman's logs are in the barn office. Then that's where I need to work tomorrow. I was looking at her with an expression she couldn't entirely read. Not disbelief, not relief, something more complicated than either. Why did you say not yet? He asked. Because I don't present accusations without documentation, she said. Someone in your operation is stealing from you. That person has a name. Before we have that name, we have nothing actionable. We, he said. She heard the word land between them. She held his gaze. Yes, she said. If you want my help, that's how I work. Not as your employee following instructions, as a person who is genuinely trying to solve the problem. If that's not acceptable. It's acceptable, he said. He said it without hesitation. And for the first time in a very long time, Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter. The feeling of being believed. That evening, Nathaniel's cook, a stout, practical woman named Ruth, who had worked for Carter Ranch for 11 years, set 2 plates at the large kitchen table and left them to eat without ceremony. Nathaniel poured coffee. Clara looked at the food. This isn't what I expected, she said. What did you expect? A formal dining room, she said. A show of prosperity. I have a formal dining room, he said. I eat in the kitchen. Why? Because I was raised in a kitchen, he said. And I don't see any reason to perform wealth for an audience of 1. She looked at him across the table. You've been alone out here a long time, she said. It was not a question. He was quiet for a moment. 6 years, he said. Since Eleanor. Your wife? Yes. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, he said. Then, no, that's not true. 6 years sounds like a long time. It doesn't always feel like it. Clara wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. My father died when I was 17, she said. For 3 years after that, I'd still turn to tell him something when I was out in the field. Some small thing, a particular cloud formation, or the way the creek was running. Something he would have wanted to know about. Nathaniel looked at her, and then one day I stopped turning, she said. Not because I forgot him, because I'd finally understood that the turning was for me, not for him. And eventually I found other ways to carry what I wanted to say. He was quiet for a long moment. What did you do with all of it? He asked. All the things you would have told him. I wrote them down, she said. For a while. Then I just kept working. Work has a way of holding things that words can't. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Yes, he said. It does. They ate in silence for a while. The comfortable kind. The kind that takes years to build between most people. Clara noticed this, but did not say so. She put down her fork. I should tell you something, she said. All right. I'm not here because I'm desperate, she said. I came back to that platform 10 times because I was looking for something specific. Not rescue, not a wealthy arrangement. A person who could see the whole of who I am and not require me to make myself smaller to be acceptable. And you're telling me this now because I want you to know that if tomorrow I find what I expect to find in those delivery logs, I'll tell you the truth about it, even if the answer makes everything more complicated, she said. Even if it involves someone you trust. Even if it costs me the opportunity you've offered. Nathaniel set down his coffee cup. He looked at her for a long time. Clara, he said, I grew this ranch to what it is by making accurate decisions with accurate information. The most valuable thing anyone in my operation can offer me is the truth stated plainly, regardless of how inconvenient it is. Most people say that, she said. Fewer mean it. I mean it. She held his gaze. Then I'll find out what's in those logs, she said. Later that night, alone in the guest room at the far end of the main house, Clara sat on the edge of the bed and took the folded letter from her coat pocket. She didn't open it. She knew what it said. She had written it herself, the summary of her experience, her skills, her circumstances condensed for the benefit of men who needed to assess her quickly. She had watched 9 men hold this letter. 9 men who had looked at it and decided what it told them was insufficient. She thought about Nathaniel Carter, who had not asked to read it, who had asked instead why she kept coming back. She folded it again and set it on the nightstand. Through the window, she could see the vast dark of the Montana Territory night stars running from horizon to horizon, unobstructed, extraordinary in their density and brightness, the way they only look when you are genuinely far from anywhere. She was far from anywhere, and for the first time in a very long time, that did not feel like a punishment. She pressed her hand flat against the nightstand. Not yet, she told herself, but maybe soon. The delivery logs were in the barn office, as Nathaniel had said, stacked in chronological order in a wooden crate signed at each delivery by the receiving foreman. Clara worked through the morning cross-referencing each delivery record against the invoice entries in the main ledger she had brought from the house. By noon, she had found the pattern. It was elegant in the ruthless way that successful theft always is. The invoices submitted to the main account were being duplicated. A legitimate invoice would arrive for a genuine delivery, and then 7 to 10 days later, a second invoice for the same delivery would arrive with a slightly different invoice number and a marginally different total. The difference was small enough that a busy foreman reviewing only the totals would likely not notice. But over 22 months, the accumulated discrepancy was significant. She found the name attached to the billing accounts in the third stack of records. R. Collier. She set down the ledger. A ranch hand named Roy Collier had worked for Carter Ranch for 4 years. He handled supply ordering and invoice processing, a position of considerable trust in a large operation. She sat with the name for a moment. She thought about what Nathaniel had said. The most valuable thing anyone in my operation can offer me is the truth stated plainly, regardless of how inconvenient it is. She picked up the ledger. She walked back to the main house. Nathaniel was in the yard when she came out. He saw something in her face and came directly toward her. "You found it," he said. "Yes," she said. "Who?" she told him. He absorbed it without visible reaction, not because he didn't feel it. She could tell that, but because he was the kind of man who processed before he responded, who didn't let the first wave of feeling carry him somewhere he'd regret going. "Show me," he said. She did. They went through every page together, Clara walking him through the pattern, Nathaniel asking precise, intelligent questions that told her he was keeping up fully, not just following along. At the end, he sat back and was quiet for a long moment. "He's been with this operation for 4 years. Nathaniel said finally. "Yes. I trusted him with the supply accounts because I thought he was careful." "He is careful," Clara said. "That's what made it possible." Nathaniel looked at her. "Most people in your position would have softened this," he said. "Found a gentler way to present it. Given me room to deny it a while longer. Would that have helped you?" "No." "Then it wouldn't have helped me either," she said. He stood. He looked out the window at the yard, at the barn, at the operation he had built. "I need to handle this correctly," he said. "Not with anger, with documentation and a proper accounting and the right authority." "I can help you prepare the documentation," she said. He turned back to face her. "Clara," he said. "Yes." "Why did 9 men walk away from you?" She held his gaze. "Because I wouldn't make myself into what they needed me to be," she said. He nodded, slowly, like a man who had just confirmed something he had already begun to believe. "Good," he said quietly, and went to find his ranch manager. Roy Collier was brought into the main house at 4 o'clock that afternoon. Nathaniel had sent Thomas to find him, not with urgency, not with accusation, just a simple message that the boss needed to speak with him about the supply accounts. Routine. Unremarkable. The kind of request that wouldn't raise alarm in a guilty man until the moment he walked through the door and saw Clara sitting at the desk with 4 ledger books open in front of her and a stack of cross-referenced invoices arranged in careful sequence beside them. Clara watched his face the moment he registered what he was looking at. There was a particular kind of stillness that comes over a person when they realize the ground has shifted beneath them without warning. Not panic comes later. First, there is that fraction of a second where the body simply stops where every system pauses and recalibrates against a new and unwelcome reality. Roy Collier went through that fraction of a second in the doorway of Nathaniel Carter's office. Then he stepped inside and closed the door behind him as though nothing was wrong. How was a lean man in his early 30s, sun-darkened and capable-looking, with the kind of easy, unhurried manner that comes either from genuine confidence or from years of practice, appearing calm. Clara had not spoken more than a dozen words to him since arriving at Carter Ranch, but she had watched him work, and she understood now why Nathaniel had trusted him. Roy Collier was very good at looking like exactly what he wanted you to believe he was. "Mr. Carter," Roy said. His voice was steady. "You needed me." "Sit down, Roy," Nathaniel said. Roy pulled a chair and sat. He did not look at Clara directly. That was deliberate, she noted. Looking at her directly would have required acknowledging that she was relevant to whatever was happening. He was still running calculations, still deciding how to play this. "This is Clara Whitmore," Nathaniel said. "She's been reviewing the ranch accounts." "Yes, sir. I'd heard she was looking over some records." "She found something," Nathaniel said. "I'd like you to explain it." Clara set the first invoice in front of Roy without speaking. Then the second, the duplicate with its marginally different total and its slightly altered invoice number. Then a third pair. Then a fourth. She watched him look at each one. His breathing didn't change. His posture didn't shift. He was good. She had expected that. A man who had run a scheme this carefully for 22 months had enough self-control to sit still when the evidence was put in front of him. "Those are supply invoices," Roy said. "Yes," Clara said. "2 of each. Filed approximately 7 to 10 days apart. The second invoice each time submitted to the main account with a different number and a slightly adjusted total." "Billing errors happen," Roy said. "Suppliers make mistakes. It's a large operation." "Billing errors don't follow a consistent pattern across 22 months, Clara said. "And billing errors don't consistently route the overpayments to the same secondary account." The room was very quiet. Roy looked at Nathaniel. "Mr. Carter, I don't know what she thinks she found." "Don't," Nathaniel said. One word, quiet, absolute. Roy stopped. "I've known you 4 years," Nathaniel said. "I gave you the supply accounts because I thought you were careful and honest. I'm telling you now that the documentation in front of you is complete and accurate. I'm giving you one opportunity to speak truthfully about it before I take this to the territorial marshal." The silence stretched. Roy looked at the invoices again, and then something changed in him. Some final calculation running its course and arriving at its conclusion. The careful, steady performance dropped. Not all at once, not dramatically, but Clara watched it go like watching a man set down something heavy he had been carrying too long. "I needed money," Roy said. "Everyone needs money," Nathaniel said. "My mother is sick, in billings, the doctor's fees." He stopped, started again. "I didn't take more than I needed. I kept it small. I thought—" He stopped again. "You thought I wouldn't notice," Nathaniel said. Roy was quiet. "I might not have," Nathaniel said. "Not for another year, maybe longer." He paused. "But you made a choice, Roy. And that choice is now going to define what happens next." Clara watched Roy's hands on the tabletop. Flat. Still. The hands of a man who had run out of moves. "What happens next?" Roy asked. "You'll write a full account of every transaction," Nathaniel said. "Every amount, every date where the money went. You'll sign it, and you'll repay what you took however long it requires, whatever arrangement makes that possible. Then you'll leave this ranch. And the marshal, if you cooperate fully and the repayment is genuine, I won't pursue criminal charges." Nathaniel's voice had not risen once. It was the voice of a man who had made a decision and saw no need for emotion to be part of delivering it. "If you make any part of this more difficult than it needs to be, I will." Roy looked up. "Why?" "Because destroying a man's life entirely serves no one," Nathaniel said. "And because your mother didn't steal from me." The sound Roy made was not quite crying and not quite not crying. He pressed the back of his hand against his mouth for a moment and then set it flat on the table again. "I'll write it all down," he said. "Start tonight," Nathaniel said. "Thomas will sit with you." Roy stood. He looked at Clara for the first time since he'd sat down. She met his gaze without anger. There was nothing to be angry at exactly. He had made a choice. He was living inside its consequences. That was simply the way things worked. Not cruel, not kind, just true. Roy left. Nathaniel closed the door and turned back to the room. He stood at the window for a long moment with his back to Clara, looking out at the yard where his operation continued in its ordinary late-afternoon rhythm, entirely unaware that something central to it had just been exposed and dismantled. "You handled that well," Clara said. "I handled it the only way I know how," he said. "Directly." "Most men in your position would have led with anger," she said. "Made an example of it." "Making an example doesn't recover the money," he said. "And it doesn't give me accurate information about the full extent of the problem." He turned from the window. "You were right," he said, "about not presenting accusations without documentation. If I'd gone at him without what you put together, he would have denied it, and I'd have lost both the evidence and any chance of recovery." "He might still find a way to complicate it," Clara said. "He might," Nathaniel agreed. "But I don't think he will." "Why not?" "Because he's not a bad man who wanted to steal from me," Nathaniel said. "He's a frightened man who made a terrible decision and then couldn't find his way back from it." He paused. "That doesn't excuse it, but it changes the approach." Clara looked at him. She had met a great many men in her life. Men who led with force. Men who led with charm. Men who used reasonableness as its own form of control, offering the appearance of fairness as a way of maintaining absolute authority. Nathaniel Carter was none of those things. He was simply honest. In her experience, simple honesty in a powerful man was rarer than gold in a worked-out creek bed. "What do you need from me now?" she asked. He looked at her steadily. "I need you to stay," he said. "Not because of the accounts, though I'd be a fool not to want your eyes on the records going forward. But because this ranch has been operating on incomplete information for nearly 2 years, and the only person who walked through my office door and saw the full picture clearly was you." "I've been here 2 days," Clara said. "I know." "That's a considerable amount of trust for 2 days." "Yes," he said. "It is." She held his gaze. "I'll stay through the end of the month," she said. "See if the arrangement makes sense for both of us." He nodded. "That's fair," he said, and went to find Thomas. The end of the month became 6 weeks. Not because Clara made a conscious decision to extend her stay, but because Carter Ranch had a way of generating problems at a pace that did not allow for orderly conclusion, and Clara had a way of being unable to leave a problem she had started solving. The Roy Collier situation resolved itself within the first week. The written account was complete. Thomas had witnessed it, and the repayment arrangement, Roy's share of wages from a new position at a smaller operation 40 miles east, was structured and signed. Nathaniel had been exactly as good as his word on every point. Clara noted that, filed it in the part of her mind that kept track of what people's behavior actually said about them, as distinct from what they claimed. The supply accounts were restructured. Clara redesigned the invoice verification process, a double sign requirement, staggered approval, a monthly cross-reference against the delivery logs. It took 4 days to implement and would save Carter Ranch thousands of dollars over the next several years, not only in preventing future theft, but in eliminating the ordinary accounting errors that had been quietly accumulating for years beneath the larger problem. Nathaniel looked over the new system when she was done. "You should have charged me for this," he said. "We haven't discussed my position yet," she said. "No," he said. "We haven't." They were standing in the office, the late afternoon light coming through the west window. Ruth had left coffee on the desk, which had become its own small daily ceremony, the coffee appearing at the same time each afternoon, whether or not anyone had asked for it. "I don't want to employ you," Nathaniel said. She looked at him. "I want to court you properly," he said. "Which means you're not here as an employee. You're here as a person I'm trying to understand." Those two things can coexist, she said. Not without complications, he said. If you're my employee, what you do for this ranch is a transaction. I pay you, you deliver work. The balance is clear. If you're here as someone I'm courting, then everything you contribute is a gift. And a gift creates a different kind of obligation. Clara was quiet for a moment. You've thought about this carefully, she said. I have a lot of hours in the saddle, he said. Thinking is how I spend them. What do you propose then? You stay through the season, he said. I pay you fairly for the accounting work, not because I'm employing you, but because the work has value, and I refuse to benefit from someone else's expertise without acknowledgement. And we spend time together as two adults, deciding whether this makes sense between us. Not as a business arrangement, not as a social performance, as two people. And if we decide it doesn't make sense, then I've compensated you fairly for genuine work, he said, and we both walk away without obligation. Clara looked at him for a long moment. How many women have you courted since Eleanor? She asked. The question surprised him, she could see that. But he answered it directly. 2, he said. Both in the first 2 years after she died. Both unsuccessful, and in retrospect, both premature. I wasn't ready. I was just lonely. And now I'm still lonely, he said. But I'm also ready. There's a difference. She nodded slowly. All right, she said. 1 season. What Clara had not anticipated, what she genuinely had not prepared herself for, was how much she liked Carter Ranch. Not just the work, though. The work was satisfying in the way that only genuinely useful work can be. She liked the physical texture of the place, the weight of the ledger books, the particular scratch of the pen across invoice paper, the sound of the yard outside the office window in the morning, horses and men, and the occasional argument about something practical that resolved itself in 10 minutes, because there was too much to do to stay angry. She liked Ruth, who fed her without fuss, and asked no questions about her personal circumstances, but managed to communicate through a series of small domestic attentions that she was glad Clara was there. She liked Thomas, who had turned out to be a man of considerable quiet competence, the kind of ranch hand who never stated an opinion, but whose actions made his assessments perfectly clear. And she liked Nathaniel. This was the part she had not prepared for. She had expected to respect him, his directness, his fairness, the particular quality of his intelligence. She had found those things quickly and stored them where she kept the reliable facts about people. She had not expected to find him interesting in the way that makes you realize mid-conversation that you have lost track of time. Their evenings had developed a rhythm. After dinner, always in the kitchen, never in the formal dining room, they would sit with coffee and talk. Not about the ranch, or not only about the ranch, about the larger things that working people rarely have time to discuss during daylight hours. One evening, he asked her what she would have done if she hadn't lost the farm. She thought about it genuinely before answering. I don't know, she said. The farm was all I'd planned for. When it was gone, I had to invent something else. What did you invent? The idea that competence was portable, she said. That what I knew how to do wasn't attached to one piece of land. That I could take it somewhere else, and it would still work. That took courage, he said. It took necessity, she said. Courage is what you call it afterward when it worked out. At the time, it just felt like the only available option. He smiled, not the polite expression she had first seen on his face, but something warmer. Private, the smile of a man who finds genuine amusement in something real. Eleanor used to say something similar, he said. That what people call bravery is mostly just stubbornness with better marketing. She sounds like she was remarkable, Clara said. She was, he said. Then carefully, she would have liked you, I think. Clara was quiet. Is that difficult to say? She asked. Yes, he said. But I mean it, so I said it anyway. She held that for a moment. Tell me about how you built this place, she said. Not the business of it. The actual doing of it. He looked at her, a look she had come to recognize, that checking look, making sure the question was genuine before committing to the answer. It was cold, he said. The first winter, Eleanor and I lived in a single room attached to the barn. The main house was framed, but not finished. We had 17 cattle, no foreman, and more debt than I want to tell you about. Tell me anyway. $12,000, he said. Borrowed against the land and the cattle both. If we lost 20 head to that first winter, the whole operation collapsed. How many did you lose? 4, he said. 4 head in the worst February anyone in the territory could remember. And Eleanor, he stopped, looked at his coffee cup, looked back at her. Eleanor would go out with me at 2 in the morning in temperatures I won't describe to you, to check on cattle that we couldn't afford to lose, in a coat that wasn't warm enough, never complaining, never suggesting we should have made a different choice. Because she believed in what you were building, Clara said. Because she understood that what we were building was the only life we had, he said, and she wasn't willing to let it go without a fight. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the evening had fully darkened, and the Montana Territory stars were doing their extraordinary work across the full width of the sky. I understand that feeling, Clara said. He looked at her. I know you do, he said. That's why I'm telling you. 3 weeks into her stay, Clara found the second problem. It was smaller than the supply account fraud, a boundary discrepancy in the eastern section. Deed records that didn't match the actual fence line placement. On its own, it looked like an administrative inconsistency. The kind of thing that accumulates over years of rapid expansion, where records don't always keep pace with physical reality. But Clara had grown up on a farm, and she had learned at 17 in the worst possible way that boundary discrepancies in deed records are never administrative until they are suddenly legal. She brought it to Nathaniel at the end of the day. The eastern section, she said. Your deed records show the boundary at the creek fork. Your actual fence line is 12 yards east of that. He set down his coffee. That's been there since the original survey, he said. When was the original survey? 1879. And the neighboring property to the east. The Halston parcel, he said. It's been empty for 2 years. Old man Halston died. His son lives in St. Louis. Has anyone been in contact with the son about the property? Not that I know of, he said. He was looking at her carefully now. Why? Because an empty parcel with a deed boundary discrepancy in its favor is an opportunity, she said. If someone were to purchase the Halston parcel and then conduct a proper survey, they could claim 12 yards of Carter Ranch land, he said. Potentially more depending on how the discrepancy compounds along the full boundary line, she said. I'd need to review the survey maps against the full deed to calculate the exposure. He was very still. Who would know about this? He said. Anyone who had access to your deed records and was paying attention, she said. She watched him work through the implication. Roy had access to the deed records, he said slowly. He did, Clara said. But Roy's motivation was cash. He wasn't positioned to purchase a property. But he could have shared that information, Nathaniel said, with someone who was. Clara said nothing. She let him arrive at the conclusion himself, because a conclusion you reach is one you believe, and a conclusion that is handed to you is one you defend without fully trusting. I need to contact a land attorney, Nathaniel said. You need to contact a land attorney before anyone else contacts the Halston heir, Clara said. If the sale of that parcel hasn't already been initiated. The change in his expression was subtle, but unmistakable. How fast can you put together a summary document? He said. Everything you've found. The deed discrepancy, the measurement difference, the potential exposure. 2 hours, she said. I need it in 1, he said. Then I need you to stay out of this office for the next hour, she said. He was already at the door. I'll be in the yard, he said. The land attorney, a man named Garrett, who operated out of the territorial court in Helena, arrived at Carter Ranch 4 days later. He was a small, precise man who wore city clothes without apology in a place where city clothes marked you clearly as an outsider. He reviewed Clara's summary document with the focused attention of someone who recognized the quality of what he was looking at. Who prepared this? He asked Nathaniel. She did, Nathaniel said. Garrett looked at Clara with the particular expression of a man reassessing a situation he thought he already understood. "This is thorough work," he said. "Thank you," Clara said. "Are you an attorney?" "No." "You've done legal document preparation before." "I've had reason to understand property law," she said, "through necessity." Garrett looked at the document again. "The discrepancy is real," he said. "And your instinct about the risk is sound. The question is whether anyone has acted on it." He paused. "I made some inquiries before riding out here. The Halston parcel was listed with a St. Louis agent 3 weeks ago." Nathaniel looked at Clara. She had already known or suspected. The timing of the listing relative to Roy Collier's departure from Carter Ranch was not a coincidence she could easily dismiss. "Is there a buyer?" Nathaniel asked. "A prospective one," Garrett said. "A man named Harmon, Gerald Harmon. He's a land speculator out of Denver. He's been acquiring frontier parcels and using boundary discrepancies to file expanded claims through territorial court." "You know him," Nathaniel said. "I know of him," Garrett said. "He's very good at what he does. He identifies properties with adjacency issues, acquires the neighboring parcel, and files a quiet title action before the affected landowner understands what's happening." "Can he win?" Nathaniel said. Garrett set down the document. "If he gets a survey done and files before you correct your deed records, he has a reasonable argument," he said. "Territorial courts have ruled in favor of documented boundary claims before, especially when the larger landowner has been benefiting from the discrepancy for years." He paused. "The fact that the discrepancy was almost certainly an original survey error, rather than intentional encroachment, doesn't help you unless you can prove it." "Can we correct the deed records?" Clara asked. "A corrective deed filing backed by a new survey," Garrett said. "It's your strongest protection, but it has to happen before Harmon files." "How long do we have?" Nathaniel said. "Days," Garrett said. "A week at most if he's already moving." The room went quiet. Clara watched Nathaniel absorb this. Watched him do what she had already come to understand was his particular capability, taking a serious problem at its full weight without either minimizing it or being paralyzed by it. Just looking at it directly and starting to decide. "What do you need from me?" he said to Garrett. "Access to your original survey records and every deed document going back to '79, Garrett said. "And a surveyor I can trust in Helena who can turn a new survey around in 72 hours. "The survey records are here," Nathaniel said. He looked at Clara. "Can you pull them?" "They're already on the desk," she said. Both men looked at her. "I pulled them this morning," she said, "after I sent the wire to Mr. Garrett's office." Garrett let out a short breath of what was almost laughter. "Mr. Carter," he said, "wherever you found this woman, I'd recommend keeping her." Nathaniel looked at Clara with an expression she had not seen from him before. Not quite gratitude, not quite pride, something that lived between those two things and beyond both of them. "I'm working on it," he said quietly. Clara did not sleep much that night. Not from anxiety, or not primarily. The Harmon situation was serious, but it was manageable. Garrett was competent. The documentation was solid, and Nathaniel was the kind of man who turned a problem into a project rather than a catastrophe. What kept her awake was something quieter. She lay in the guest room at the end of the house and listened to the ordinary night sounds of Carter Ranch, the distant movement of horses, the wind across the roof, the particular settling sounds of a large wooden structure that had been standing through many seasons. She thought about what Garrett had said. "Wherever you found this woman, I'd recommend keeping her." She thought about the way Nathaniel had looked at her when he said, "I'm working on it." She pressed her hand flat against the blanket and looked up at the ceiling in the dark. She had spent 9 appearances on a platform trying to be seen by a stranger. She had understood that the right person would recognize something in her that she herself sometimes struggled to believe was still there. The capable, honest, stubborn, competent woman she had been building herself into since she was 17 years old. She had not expected that being seen would feel like this, not like relief, like recognition. The difference she was beginning to understand mattered enormously. She thought about Nathaniel Carter sitting alone in this large, quiet house for 6 years. She thought about Eleanor, who had gone out in a February night in a coat that wasn't warm enough because the life they were building was the only life they had, and she wasn't willing to let it go. She thought about Roy Collier's hands flat on the table, and Garrett's voice saying days a week at most, and underneath all of it steady and persistent and impossible to look at directly. Just yet, the question she had not allowed herself to ask. What are you hoping for, Clara? She didn't answer it. Not yet. But she stopped being afraid of it, which in her experience was how most important things began. Garrett left for Helena the following morning with Clara's summary document, the original survey records, and a written authorization from Nathaniel to proceed with the corrective deed filing at full speed. Nathaniel stood in the yard and watched the attorney ride out with the same quiet attention he gave to everything that mattered, fully present, saying nothing, letting the moment be what it was. Clara stood beside him. Not close enough to be presumptuous. Close enough to be there. He'll make it in time, she asked. Garrett doesn't miss deadlines, Nathaniel said. It's the only reason I pay what he charges. And Harmon. Harmon is a problem we've identified before it became a crisis, he said. That's the best position you can be in with any problem. He turned to look at her. You sent that wire before you told me, he said. It was not an accusation. More like a man turning something over, examining it from all sides. I wasn't certain enough to alarm you, she said. But I was certain enough to move. Most people wait for permission before they move. Most people haven't managed a farm alone at 17, she said. Something passed through his expression, not quite a smile, but related to one. The private kind. The kind that meant she had said something that landed somewhere real. No, he said. I suppose they haven't. I went back inside. Clara stayed in the yard another moment, looking out at the eastern boundary. She couldn't see from here, but knew precisely where it sat, and thought about Gerald Harmon in Denver, studying maps of other people's land, and calculating what he could take. She thought not this time. Then she went back to work. The wire from Garrett arrived on the third day. Corrective deed filed. New survey commissioned. Harmon's agent had appeared at the Territorial Land Office the morning of Garrett's filing, 40 minutes after Garrett himself. The corrective deed was on record first. Harmon had no legal ground to stand on. Nathaniel read the wire twice, set it on the desk, and looked at Clara. 40 minutes, he said. 40 minutes, she confirmed. If you hadn't pulled those survey records the night before Garrett arrived. He still might have made it, she said. Clara. He might have, she said, but probably not. Nathaniel picked up the wire again, looked at it once more, and set it down with the particular finality of a man closing a chapter. Roy knew about the boundary issue, he said. I've been thinking about it since Garrett left. Roy processed the deed correspondence last year. He would have seen the discrepancy. Yes, Clara said. And he knew Harmon. I don't know that, she said carefully. I know the timing is consistent with that conclusion, but I can't prove a connection between them. Garrett will look into it. Yes, she said. He will. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. $4,000 stolen, he said. Nearly 40 acres that could have been claimed. All of it running quietly while I was out there managing cattle and thinking my operation was sound. Your operation is sound, Clara said. It had two specific vulnerabilities that were being deliberately exploited. That's different from being fundamentally broken. He looked at her. You're being generous. I'm being accurate, she said. There's a difference, remember. The corner of his mouth moved. Yes, he said. I remember. He stood. I owe you something, he said. You're compensating me fairly for the accounting work, she said. We agreed on that. That's not what I mean, he said. He looked at her directly in that storm-gray way that she had learned meant he was about to say something he had thought through carefully. I mean that you came here as a stranger with a suitcase, and in 3 weeks you have saved this ranch from 2 serious threats. And you did it without being asked, without seeking recognition, and without using it as leverage. I didn't do it to be owed something, she said. I know, he said. That's precisely the point. The silence between them had a different quality than it had in the first days. less careful, more settled. The silence of people who have stopped working to convince each other of anything and have started simply being in the same place. "Nathaniel," she said. "Yes. I need to ask you something direct." "All right. What do you actually want?" she said. "Not from a practical standpoint. Not from the ranch's standpoint. From yourself. What are you hoping this becomes?" He didn't answer immediately, which she appreciated because an immediate answer to that question would have been performance. "Company," he said finally. "Genuine company. Someone who is actually here, not because the ranch is comfortable or because I'm wealthy, but because they chose to be." He paused. "Eleanor chose to be here when being here was cold and indebted and uncertain. That choice meant everything. I want to understand if you're capable of making a choice like that." "You want to know if I'd have come in the bad years?" she said. "Yes." She looked at him steadily. "Ask me something that would tell you," she said. "All right," he said. "If I lost this ranch tomorrow, all of it, the land, the cattle, the operation, what would you do?" She didn't hesitate. "I'd ask what you needed help with first," she said, "and then we'd figure it out from there." He looked at her for a long time. "That's the right answer," he said quietly. "It's the honest answer," she said, "which is the only kind I have." The following week arrived with the particular cruelty of frontier life, which has a reliable instinct for delivering complications precisely when things have begun to feel manageable. A woman rode into Carter Ranch on a Tuesday morning. Clara was in the office when she heard the arrival. The sound of an unfamiliar horse, followed by voices in the yard, followed by Ruth's distinctive brisk footsteps coming toward the office door. Ruth knocked twice and opened the door without waiting. "There's a woman here," Ruth said. Her tone carried a specific neutrality that Clara had learned to read as Ruth's version of a warning. "Says she knows Mr. Carter from back east. Name's Victoria Harrington." Clara set down her pen. "Where's Nathaniel?" "Riding the north pasture," Ruth said. "Thomas went to get him." "Did she say what she wants?" "She says she's passing through Montana territory, on her way to visit family in Oregon." Ruth's expression communicated precisely how much she believed this. She asked if she could wait. "Of course," Clara said. "Put her in the front room. Coffee." Ruth gave her a look that asked without words whether Clara understood what she was walking into. Clara understood perfectly. She picked up her pen and went back to the ledger. She was not going to rearrange her morning for a woman she hadn't met yet. Victoria Harrington was everything Silver Creek's Whisper Network would have designed if it had been asked to produce a contrast to Clara Whitmore. She was 32 years old. Clara learned this later, with the kind of self-possessed beauty that comes from having always been beautiful and knowing it without being vain about it. She had traveled from Boston, not from Oregon, and had made no particular effort to maintain the Oregon story. Once it became clear Clara was not someone who accepted things at face value. Clara met her in the front room 40 minutes after Ruth's warning, when the ledger page she was working on was complete, and her notes were in order. She would not be rushed. Victoria Harrington rose from her chair when Clara entered. She assessed Clara in the practiced, instantaneous way of a woman who has spent a lifetime understanding social hierarchies. "You must be Miss Whitmore," she said. "Nathaniel mentioned you in his last letter." "Did he?" Clara said. "He said he'd found someone remarkable, helping with the ranch accounts." Victoria smiled a skilled smile, warm on the surface, measuring underneath. "I didn't realize you were staying here." "I'm here through the season," Clara said. "Can I offer you anything while you wait for Nathaniel?" "Ruth has been very kind," Victoria said. "Please sit down. We may as well get acquainted." Clara sat. Victoria looked at her with the comfortable confidence of a woman who had never had to fight for a seat at any table. "How long have you known Nathaniel?" Clara asked. "Since before Eleanor died," Victoria said easily. "Our families have known each other for many years. Boston circles, you understand." She paused just long enough for that to land. "He's been through a great deal. I've always admired how he's managed." "He's built something extraordinary here," Clara said. "He has," Victoria said. though it must be an isolated life for a man of his caliber. She smiled again. He deserves someone who can offer him the kind of social connection that a man in his position needs. It's not just about the ranch, of course. There are business relationships, civic standing, the broader world beyond Montana territory. Clara looked at her. She understood exactly what was happening. It was not the first time someone had tried to make her feel small by describing a kind of value she didn't possess. It was, however, the most elegant version of it she had encountered. "You're right," Clara said pleasantly. "Connection to the broader world matters. Nathaniel thinks carefully about what his operation needs." "As any wise man does," Victoria said. "I'm sure you understand." "Completely," Clara said. She kept her voice entirely even, her face entirely calm, because she had been doing that for a very long time, and Victoria Harrington, polished and connected and undeniably accomplished, had not spent 27 years developing the particular discipline of a woman who has been underestimated by experts. The sound of horses in the yard ended the conversation. Nathaniel came in from the yard, still carrying the morning on him, the smell of horses and open land, the particular alertness of a man who has been working since before dawn. He stopped when he saw Victoria. Clara watched his face. What she saw was not the warmth of a man encountering someone he loves. What she saw was something more complicated: affection. Yes, of the long-standing variety that comes from shared history, but underneath it something more guarded. The expression of a man who has been surprised and is deciding how to respond. "Victoria," he said, "I didn't know you were coming." "It was impulsive," she said, rising and extending her hands to him with practiced warmth. "I was passing through and couldn't bear not to stop. It's been too long." "It has," he said. He was careful with her greeting present, but not effusive. He stepped back after a moment and looked at Clara. "I see you've met Clara." "We've had a lovely conversation," Victoria said. "She's been very welcoming." "Clara," Nathaniel said, "I'll need an hour with Victoria. Can we meet this afternoon to go over the northern supply chain numbers?" "Of course," Clara said. She left the room. She walked down the hall to the office, sat at the desk, and picked up her pen. Her hand was perfectly steady. She would not allow herself to read anything into what she had just seen until she had something real to read. She had spent too many years making accurate assessments of difficult situations to start inventing problems where the evidence was insufficient. But she was honest enough with herself to acknowledge in the privacy of her own mind that her chest felt different than it had an hour ago. Tighter, less settled. She pressed her hand flat against the desk and went back to work. Victoria stayed for 3 days. It was 2 days and 22 hours longer than Clara had expected. She was a charming house guest, genuinely charming, not performed, which Clara respected, even as she found it difficult. She knew the right amount to help and the right amount to stand aside. She told stories well. She asked intelligent questions about the ranch operation that revealed a familiarity with Nathaniel's world, even if it was the familiarity of a frequent visitor rather than someone who had lived inside it. And she made a point at every reasonable opportunity of being in a room with Nathaniel. Clara noticed this. She noticed other things too. She noticed that Nathaniel was courteous with Victoria and not particularly at ease. That he laughed at the right moments, but not with the particular quality of laughter she had heard from him in the kitchen over coffee in the evenings. That he asked Clara for her thoughts on the northern supply chain numbers in front of Victoria, as though deliberately demonstrating something. What exactly, Clara was not sure. On the second evening, Clara was working late in the office when Victoria appeared in the doorway. "You work very hard," Victoria said. "There's a lot to do," Clara said without looking up. Victoria entered the room and sat in the chair across the desk. The chair Roy Collier had sat in the chair. Garrett had sat in the chair that seemed to be where important conversations happened. "Can I ask you something directly?" Victoria said. Clara set down her pen. "Of course," she said. "Are you in love with him?" The directness of it was impressive. Clara acknowledged that internally. "I've been here 6 weeks," Clara said. "That's not an answer." "No," Clara said. "It isn't." Victoria looked at her without hostility. That was the part Clara found most difficult. Victoria Harrington was not a villain. She was a woman who wanted something and was making her case with the tools available to her. "I've known Nathaniel for 14 years, Victoria said. "I watched Eleanor die. I watched him rebuild himself after that. I know what kind of man he is." "I believe you," Clara said. "Then you understand why someone who cares about him would want to make sure the person in his life is—" She paused, choosing carefully. "The right match for everything he's built." "You mean someone of appropriate social standing?" Clara said. "Connected families. Boston circles." Victoria did not flinch. "I mean someone who understands the full scope of his world," she said. "This ranch is remarkable, but Nathaniel is more than this ranch." "Yes," Clara said. "He is. He deserves someone who can stand beside him in every room he enters," Victoria said. "Not just this one." Clara looked at her directly. "You're telling me I'm not that person," she said. "I'm asking you to consider whether you are," Victoria said. "Honestly." The office was very quiet. Outside, the Montana Territory night was doing its vast and indifferent work. The wind moved across the roof. A horse shifted in the barn. Clara thought about 9 men on a platform. She thought about the folded letter in her coat pocket. She thought about the word caliber, and the phrase Boston circles, and the particular kind of refinement that people use to make other people feel like they are standing in the wrong room. She had been made to feel like she was standing in the wrong room for most of her adult life. The difference was that she had stopped believing it. "Victoria," she said, "I appreciate that you care about Nathaniel. That's evident and genuine, and I respect it." She kept her voice level. "But you're asking me to measure myself against a standard you've defined. And I've spent too long letting other people define what I'm worth to do it anymore." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "That's a brave answer," she said. "It's just an honest one," Clara said, "which is the only kind I have." The morning of Victoria's 3rd day. Clara woke before dawn and went to the office. Not to avoid Victoria. Not to perform industriousness. Because there was a problem in the northern supply chain numbers that had been sitting at the edge of her attention for 2 days, and she wanted to work through it while her mind was clear. She was an hour into it when Nathaniel appeared in the doorway. He was dressed for the day, coat on, hat in hand. He looked at her with the particular expression of a man who has been thinking about something difficult. "You're up early," he said. "So are you," she said. He came in and sat down across from her. He set his hat on the edge of the desk. "Victoria leaves this morning," he said. "I know," Clara said. "I want to tell you something before she goes," he said. "Because I think you've been sitting with a question you haven't asked me, and I don't want you to sit with it any longer than necessary." Clara set down her pen. She waited. "Victoria is someone I've known a long time," he said. "She is a good person. She was kind to Eleanor during the illness. She has always been available in a way that I think she believes constitutes love." He paused. "But available and right are not the same thing. And I've known for a long time that what Victoria wants is someone to match a life she already has, not someone to build something with." "She thinks I'm not the right match for your world," Clara said. "I heard that conversation," he said. She looked at him. "The door was open," he said simply. "I wasn't trying to overhear. I came to find you, and I heard enough. And I want you to understand something clearly," he said. "I spent 15 years building this ranch. I know the difference between something built correctly and something that looks correct. Victoria would look correct beside me. She would say the right things in the right rooms. She would understand the social architecture of my world." He paused. "And I would be lonely every day." Clara was very still. "The last 6 weeks." He said, "I have not been lonely. For the first time in 6 years, I have not been lonely. Not because the ranch problems were solved. Not because the accounts are in order. Because there has been someone in this house who is actually genuinely here." She did not say anything immediately. She sat with it. She let it be real before she responded to it. "Nathaniel," she said finally. "Yes. I'm not easy," she said. "I have opinions that I express directly. I don't stop working when someone thinks I should. I ask uncomfortable questions, and I expect honest answers. I'm 27 years old with no family, no property, and a history of 9 public rejections. I know all of that, he said. I want you to know that I'm not telling you so you'll argue against it, she said. I'm telling you because you deserve an accurate picture of what you're choosing. Clara, he said. I am a 42-year-old widower who runs a cattle operation in the middle of a territory that's still figuring out what it is. I have trust problems I didn't know I had until Roy Collier. I spend more time talking to horses than people, and apparently I have a land boundary discrepancy that nearly cost me 40 acres. He looked at her. We're both exactly what we are. I'm not asking for something easier. I'm asking for something real. She looked at him across the desk, the ledger books between them. The coffee Ruth had left that morning still warm. The survey maps in the corner. All the ordinary materials of a life that was. She was beginning to understand, no longer entirely separate from her own. All right, she said. All right, he repeated. He picked up his hat. He paused at the door. The northern supply chain problem, he said. Anything I should know before I ride out? Your eastern supplier is overcharging on freight by about 8%, she said. I'll have the documentation by noon. He nodded. He almost said something else. Instead, he put on his hat and walked out into the morning. Clara picked up her pen. Her hand was steady. Her chest was not tight. Something in her, something she had been guarding for a very long time, set up like a letter and kept in a pocket close to her heart, had quietly finally opened. Jete. Victoria left at 9 o'clock. Clara was not in the yard when she departed. Not from avoidance, she was in the middle of the freight calculation, and interrupting it would have cost her the thread of the numbers. But Ruth told her afterward that Victoria had paused before mounting her horse and looked back at the main house for a long moment. What did she look like? Clara asked. Ruth considered. Like someone who had just understood something they should have understood earlier, Ruth said, and made her peace with it. Clara nodded. She went back to the numbers. And then 20 minutes into her work, a different kind of problem arrived entirely. A rider came into the yard at speed. Not Carter Ranch's ordinary pace, but the particular urgency of news that can't wait. Clara heard it from the office, and was at the door before Ruth. The rider was young, one of the supply route men. She recognized him, and he was breathing hard from a fast ride. Mr. Carter, he said when Thomas appeared. I need Mr. Carter. He's in the north pasture, Thomas said. What's the matter? The rider looked at Thomas. Then he looked at Clara standing in the doorway. There's a man in Silver Creek, he said. A lawyer from Denver. He's been going around town telling people that Carter Ranch has been using land it doesn't own for years, saying the eastern boundary claim is fraudulent. Clara felt something go very cold and very clear in her chest simultaneously. Harmon, she said. The rider blinked. That's the name, he said. You know him. She was already moving. Thomas, she said. Get Nathaniel, now. She turned back to the office. And someone wire Garrett and Helena. What do I tell Garrett? Thomas called after her. Tell him Harmon changed his strategy, she said. He couldn't win in court, so now he's trying to win in public. She was already at the desk. The freight numbers would wait. This was a different kind of fight entirely, and she had not come this far. Not through 9 rejections. Not through Roy Collier. Not through Victoria Harrington and her Boston circles, to let a land speculator from Denver take everything she had helped build. She picked up her pen. She began to write. The document Clara wrote in that first hour was not a legal brief. It was a timeline. Every date, every invoice, every deed entry, every wire sent and received. Roy Collier's written confession, which Garrett had a copy of in Helena. The corrective deed filing time-stamped. The new survey signed by a certified territorial surveyor. The 40-minute margin by which Carter Ranch's corrective filing had preceded Harmon's agent at the land office. She wrote it in the clear, precise language she had taught herself at 17, when she learned that the difference between a farm surviving and a farm being swallowed by debt was whether the person holding the pen could make the numbers tell the truth faster than the people trying to obscure it. When Nathaniel arrived from the north pasture 40 minutes later, riding hard. Thomas having reached him quickly, he came directly to the office. He looked at the document on the desk. He read the first page standing up. Then he pulled a chair and read the rest sitting down. Clara waited. "He's telling people in town that the boundary claim was intentional," Nathaniel said when he finished. "That we've been deliberately encroaching." "Yes," Clara said. "He can't win in court. Garrett's filing is airtight, so he's going to try to win in reputation." "Damage the ranch's standing in the territory," Nathaniel said. "Make it harder to do business, pressure me to settle, or make it easier for the next parcel claim to find sympathy," Clara said. "If people believe Carter Ranch has a history of boundary disputes, a future filing looks less predatory and more like a pattern being corrected." Nathaniel set the document down. "He planned this," he said. "This wasn't an opportunistic move when the court filing failed. He had the public campaign ready." "Roy Collier told him more than the boundary discrepancy," Clara said. "He told him how the operation runs, who in town has influence, where the pressure points are." The room went very quiet. "I gave Roy 4 years," Nathaniel said. "Not with anger, with the particular weight of a man confronting the cost of misplaced trust." "Nathaniel," Clara said. He looked at her. "Harmon chose Roy because Roy was already in a desperate situation," she said. "He didn't create the betrayal. He exploited it. That's what men like Harmon do. They look for cracks in good operations, and they put pressure on them." She paused. "The answer is not to trust people less. It's to close the cracks faster." He held her gaze. "Is that what we're doing now?" he said. "That's what we're doing now," she said. He picked up the document again. "This is good," he said. "This is very good. But a document doesn't stop a man talking in a saloon." "No," Clara said. "It doesn't. We need Garrett here, not in Helena. And we need someone in Silver Creek who can speak to what Carter Ranch actually is." "Who?" She thought about it. "Henderson," she said. "He's been trading with this ranch for 7 years. He knows your operation, and he knows the town. His word carries weight." Nathaniel was already on his feet. "Thomas," he called toward the door. "Get a rider to Silver Creek. 2 stops. Garrett's wire first, then Henderson's." Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Already sent the wire to Garrett when you rode in," he said, "waiting on your word for Henderson." Nathaniel looked at Thomas, then at Clara. "How long have you two been working together?" he said. "About 40 minutes longer than you've known about it," Thomas said without expression. Nathaniel looked at Clara again. She did not quite smile. "Send Henderson the message," Nathaniel said. Gerald Harmon was not what Clara had expected. She had built a picture of him from Garrett's description, a land speculator from Denver. Systematic, calculating the kind of man who studies maps the way a hunter studies terrain. She had expected someone cold. Someone who kept the work at a distance from any human dimension. The man who arrived at Carter Ranch 2 days later, not summoned arriving of his own presumed initiative, which told her immediately that he was more confident than he should have been, was none of those things on the surface. How was 50, maybe 55, with a broad, pleasant face, and the clothing of a man who understood that in frontier territory, appearing too citified was a liability. He rode a good horse. He carried himself with the ease of someone who had been successful long enough to have forgotten what failure feels like. He arrived in the yard while Nathaniel was there, which was not a coincidence. Harmon would have had someone watching the ranch. "Mr. Carter," he said, stepping down from his horse. "Gerald Harmon, I believe we have some matters to discuss." Nathaniel did not extend his hand. "We don't," he said. "Our legal positions have been filed. If you have something to say to Carter Ranch, you say it through Garrett." "Now I understand that position," Harmon said pleasantly. "But I've found that legal positions have a way of becoming very expensive for everyone involved, and I'm a practical man. I'd rather find a sensible resolution." "The resolution is already filed," Nathaniel said. "Your agent was 40 minutes late." Harmon's pleasant expression didn't waver. "A technicality," he said. "A legal fact," Nathaniel said. Clara had come to the doorway of the main house when she heard the exchange. She stood there and watched Harmon work, because he was working clearly and deliberately, using the unhurried manner of a man who believes that if he remains calm long enough, the other person will eventually negotiate out of discomfort. Harmon's gaze found her. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "I've heard a great deal about you." "I'd be surprised if you hadn't," she said. "The woman who reorganized Carter Ranch's accounts and found the boundary issue," he said. "Very impressive for someone with what was your previous experience, a failed farm operation." She recognized the move. Diminish the threat. Reframe the competence as luck combined with limited credentials. "My previous experience is precisely sufficient," she said, "as the deed filing demonstrates." "Yes, about that filing," Harmon said. He shifted his attention smoothly back to Nathaniel, as though Clara had become less interesting. "The survey records you used for the corrective filing the original 1879 survey. There are some questions about the surveyor's methodology." Nathaniel looked at him steadily. "What questions?" "The surveyor in question, a man named Aldridge, was later found to have submitted inaccurate surveys on 3 other parcels in this region," Harmon said. "If that pattern extends to your original survey, your corrective filing may itself be based on flawed data." The yard was very quiet. Clara felt the move land not in herself, but in the air around them. This was new information. She hadn't known about Aldridge. Harmon had kept it in reserve for exactly this moment. "Garrett reviewed those survey records thoroughly," Nathaniel said. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the effort. "Garrett reviewed them for the boundary discrepancy," Harmon said. "A different question than the surveyor's underlying accuracy." He spread his hands in a gesture of pure reasonableness. "I'm not here to litigate Mr. Carter. I'm here because if there's a genuine question about the original survey methodology, a voluntary resolution between us is considerably cleaner than a territorial court. Spending 6 months sorting through survey records, while your ranch operations reputation sits in an uncertain position." He paused. "I'm prepared to offer a very fair purchase price for the disputed eastern section," he said. 12 acres, a clean boundary going forward. No court proceedings, no public uncertainty. Nathaniel looked at him for a long moment. "Get off my land," he said. Harmon's pleasant expression finally showed its first edge. "Think carefully." "Mr. Carter," he said, "a prolonged territorial dispute touches every business relationship you have. Supply contracts, grazing rights, banking relationships." He paused. "I've seen ranches this size survive very difficult seasons. I've also seen them not survive the uncertainty of a legal cloud." "Mr. Harmon," Clara said from the doorway. He looked at her. "You mentioned Aldridge's other surveys," she said. "Which specific parcels?" "I beg your pardon." "The 3 parcels where his methodology was questioned," she said. "Which ones specifically?" Harmon looked at her with the particular attention of someone recalculating. "That's a matter of record," he said. "Yes," Clara said. "It is. Which means, if you've reviewed it, you can name them." A beat of silence. "I don't have the specific parcel numbers with me," Harmon said. "Then I look forward to seeing them when you do," she said. "Along with the documentation of the findings. Court findings, I assume, since you characterize them as established fact." Another beat. Longer this time. "This is a conversation for attorneys." Harmon said, his pleasantness returning, but thinner now, like paint over a surface that doesn't take it well. "Yes," Clara said. "It is. Garrett will be here tomorrow. You're welcome to have your attorney present." Harmon looked at her. She held his gaze without difficulty. He looked back at Nathaniel. "Think about the offer," he said. "The eastern section, a clean resolution." He mounted his horse. He rode out of the yard at a controlled pace, not rushing, still performing ease. But she had seen the calculation reset behind his eyes. He'd come here expecting to rattle Nathaniel with the Aldridge information. He had not expected someone standing in the doorway who knew immediately what questions to ask. When the sound of his horse faded, Nathaniel turned to Clara. "Aldridge," he said. "It may be real," she said. "Or it may be a pressure tactic with no legal foundation. Either way, we need Garrett to check it before tomorrow. If the original survey is flawed, then we deal with that specifically," she said. A flawed original survey doesn't invalidate the corrective deed. It changes the argument, but not necessarily the outcome. Can you explain that more clearly? Even if Aldridge's methodology was questionable on other parcels, the corrective deed we filed is based on physical measurement of the actual fence line, she said. Physical measurement doesn't depend on Aldridge. It depends on what's actually there. She paused. Harmon is trying to introduce uncertainty. Uncertainty isn't the same as a legal claim. Nathaniel absorbed this. You saw that immediately, he said. I asked the question that would tell me whether it was real or theater, she said. If he'd had specific parcel numbers and court documentation ready, it would have been real. He didn't. So it's theater. It may be theater built on a real element, she said. That's the dangerous kind. Garrett needs to check Aldridge tonight. Nathaniel nodded. He looked at her for a moment. You held your ground with him, he said. A man who makes his living making people uncomfortable with their positions. He was trying to make me feel like my credentials were insufficient, she said. I've had a great deal of practice not believing that. Garrett arrived the following morning before 9. He had ridden through the night, which told Clara everything she needed to know about how seriously he was taking the Aldridge question. He came into the office and accepted Ruth's coffee without sitting down. Aldridge, he said. James Aldridge, surveyor, operated in this territory from 1874 to 1881. 3 surveys were disputed. One was overturned, a parcel east of Bozeman, 1877, completely unrelated geography. The other 2 disputes were dismissed. No pattern finding, no systemic methodological failure. Harmon knew that, Clara said. He knew it when he said it, Garrett confirmed. The Bozeman overturning is real. The characterization of it as a pattern is not. He finally sat down. It's a good move. Technically accurate in its individual component, misleading in its implication. Designed for exactly the kind of moment he used it in when he could deliver it as new information without giving you time to verify. Can he use it in court? Nathaniel said. He can try to introduce it, Garrett said. I'll defeat it. But the process costs time and money and public attention, which is his actual goal. What do we do? Nathaniel said. Garrett looked at the documents on Clara's desk, the timeline she had prepared, the cross-referenced invoices, the deed filing summary. We go to Silver Creek, he said. Not to court, not yet. We go to the community. We lay out exactly what Carter Ranch is and what Harmon is doing, publicly, before he can set the narrative further. You mean a public meeting, Nathaniel said. I mean the kind of conversation that happens in a place where everyone can hear it, Garrett said. Henderson has already been talking to people. The groundwork is there. He looked at Clara. The timeline document. Can you present it? She looked at him. In public, she said. You built it, he said. You understand every element of it. Nathaniel can speak to the ranch's history. But the documentation, the invoices, the deed, the Harmon connection that needs someone who can walk an audience through it clearly. He paused. You're the clearest thinker in this room. She's the clearest thinker I've encountered in years, Nathaniel said quietly. Clara looked at the timeline document. She thought about Silver Creek, the platform, 9 men, the crowd watching, the 1,000 small ways the town had formed its opinion of her before she had a chance to form one of herself. All right, she said. When? Day after tomorrow, Garrett said. Sheriff's office steps. I'll arrange it with Henderson today. What about Harmon? Nathaniel said. Invite him, Clara said. Both men looked at her. If he doesn't come, it looks like he has something to hide, she said. If he does come, he has to respond to specific documentation in front of witnesses. Either way, we're better positioned than if we hold a meeting that looks like it's happening without him. Garrett looked at Nathaniel. Where did you find her? He said. Bride selection platform, Nathaniel said. End of the line. Garrett shook his head slowly. 9 men walked past her, Nathaniel said. 9 fools, Garrett said, and picked up his coffee. The day before the public meeting, something happened that Clara had not planned for. She was alone in the office, Nathaniel riding the southern boundary with Thomas Garrett, preparing documents in the guest room when she heard a horse in the yard and looked out to see a woman she didn't recognize stepping down with the careful movement of someone not entirely comfortable on horseback. She was perhaps 60 years old, well-dressed in a practical frontier way. A face that had seen considerable weather and considerable life, and had organized both into an expression of settled capability. Clara went to the door. "I'm looking for Miss Whitmore," the woman said. "That's me," Clara said. "Margaret Falk," the woman said. "I own the Falk Quarter east of Henderson's Supply Depot. I heard about the meeting tomorrow." She paused. "I heard you're speaking." "Yes," Clara said. "I want to tell you something before you speak," Margaret Falk said. "About Gerald Harmon." Clara opened the door wider. "Come in," she said. "I'll get coffee." Margaret Falk sat in the chair across Clara's desk, the chair where important conversations happened, and set her hands flat on her knees with the directness of a woman who does not intend to waste time. "Harmon did this to my neighbor," she said. 2 years ago. Peter Aldham's small operation about 800 acres east of Billings. Harmon found a survey discrepancy couldn't win in court, went to the community with a story about Peter misrepresenting his boundary claims. "What happened to Peter Aldham?" Clara said. "He held on for 4 months," Margaret said. "But the banking relationship went cold. The bank didn't want the uncertainty of a lending relationship with a ranch in a public dispute. Then one of his major supply contracts didn't renew. Then he lost 2 key workers who didn't want to stay with an operation that looked unstable." She paused. "He sold 800 acres at 30 cents on the dollar to Harmon." The room was very quiet. "Harmon bought the Aldham parcel," Clara said. "And then the survey dispute disappeared," Margaret said. "Because it had never been about the survey." Clara set down her coffee cup. She thought about the eastern section, 12 acres that Harmon had offered to purchase in his reasonable resolution. "It was never about the boundary discrepancy," Clara said slowly. "The boundary gave him a legal entry point and a public narrative. But what he actually wants is the land itself. He's been working east from Billings for 3 years, Margaret said. Parcel by parcel. Some he acquires through court pressure, some through public reputation damage. The goal is to accumulate enough contiguous acreage to control the eastern water access in this part of the territory." Clara stood up. "Mrs. Falk," she said, "would you be willing to speak at the meeting tomorrow?" Margaret looked at her steadily. "I rode 2 hours to tell you this," she said. "What do you think?" Tum-tang. That evening, Clara sat with Nathaniel and Garrett and laid out what Margaret Falk had told her. The room was completely still when she finished. Garrett set down his pen. "Water access," he said. "That's the real asset. Not the eastern acreage, not the boundary correction. The creek access that runs through the eastern section. The eastern creek feeds 3 downstream operations," Clara said. "If Harmon controls the access point, he controls the water rights negotiation for this entire drainage." Nathaniel's face had gone very still. "That creek has been Carter Ranch's water source for 15 years, he said. "Yes," Clara said. "And Peter Aldham's operation fed from the same drainage system. And I'd be willing to bet there's at least one other operation along that eastern corridor that's had a boundary dispute with Harmon in the last 3 years." "I'll check tonight," Garrett said. He was already writing. "If there's a pattern of acquisitions along the eastern drainage, even 2 or 3 parcels, we have something that goes beyond a local land dispute." "What does that mean legally?" Nathaniel said. "It means we're not just defending Carter Ranch's boundary," Garrett said. "We're potentially describing a coordinated scheme to monopolize water access across multiple properties. That's a territorial matter, possibly federal." Nathaniel looked at Clara. "You found this," he said. "Margaret Falk found it," Clara said. "I just asked her to sit down." "You created the conditions where she felt safe enough to share it," he said. "That's not a small thing." She held his gaze for a moment. "Tomorrow needs to be more than a defense of Carter Ranch," she said. "If other operations along that eastern drainage have been through similar pressure, they need to know they're not alone." "Henderson will know who to contact," Nathaniel said. "People he trusts." "Tonight," Clara said. "Not tomorrow morning." Nathaniel looked at Garrett. Garrett was already closing his document folder and reaching for his coat. I'll go with you to Henderson's, Garrett said. Clara, Nathaniel said, pausing at the door. She looked at him. You're not who the town thinks you are, he said. The woman they watched on that platform, they have no idea. They will tomorrow, she said. The meeting at the Silver Creek Sheriff's Office steps drew more people than Clara had anticipated. Word had moved through the town with the particular speed that only operates when people sense that something important is actually happening. Not gossip, something more purposeful. The kind of information that passes between people who understand they have a shared stake in the outcome. Henderson had arrived with 4 other supply merchants. 2 ranch operators Clara didn't recognize had ridden in from east of town. Margaret Falk stood near the front with the solid, patient presence of a woman who has been waiting to say something important. Harmon was there. He stood at the edge of the crowd with 2 men Clara assumed were his associates, not his attorney, she noted. He had decided not to bring his attorney. Interesting decision. Either he had not expected the meeting to develop this way, or he was calculating that the absence of legal representation would make him appear more reasonable. She filed it and moved on. Nathaniel stood beside her. He had not tried to take the lead in organizing this. He had helped where she needed help and stayed out of the way where she didn't. She understood now that this was one of the things that distinguished him most clearly from the 9 men who had handed back her letter. He did not need to be the most important person in a room he cared about. Garrett opened the meeting with a clean summary of the legal situation, the deed filing, the survey, the timeline. Then Clara stood up. She held the document she had prepared 2 pages clear and ordered the kind of document she had been building in various forms since she was 17 years old. She looked at the crowd. She saw faces she recognized from the platform. Not all of them kind faces. Not all of them faces that had been particularly interested in Clara Whitmore before this morning. The woman who had whispered to her friend when Clara walked by in her brown dress. The man who had made a comment about her age at the bride platform 3 weeks before Nathaniel Carter arrived. She did not adjust her posture. She did not soften her voice. She spoke the way she had always worked, clearly, without apology, without performance. She walked them through the invoice fraud and what it had cost Carter Ranch. She walked them through the boundary discrepancy and how it had been identified and corrected. She walked them through Harmon's pattern, the Aldham parcel, the eastern drainage corridor, the water access that was the actual goal beneath every other move. She did not editorialize. She did not ask for sympathy. She gave them the facts in order and let the facts make the argument. When she finished, the crowd was quiet in the particular way of people who have just been given more clarity than they expected. Then Margaret Falk spoke. She described Peter Aldham in 3 sentences. 800 acres, 4 months of pressure, sold at 30 cents on the dollar. She described the drainage corridor. She described watching her neighbor's operation collapse under uncertainty that never resolved into an actual legal claim because the legal claim was never the point. When she sat down, 2 of the ranch operators Clara didn't recognize stood up and identified their own operations along the eastern drainage. One had received a letter from Harmon's attorney 3 months prior about a boundary question. He had dismissed it. He was not dismissing it now. Garrett spoke for 5 minutes about the territorial implications and the federal land authority's position on coordinated water access schemes. Then the crowd looked at Harmon. Harmon stood at the edge of the gathering with his 2 associates, his pleasant expression intact, and said nothing. He said nothing for a long time, and then he turned and walked to his horse. He mounted without speaking. He rode out of Silver Creek without a single word in response to anything that had been said. The crowd watched him go. Henderson, standing beside Nathaniel, said quietly, "Well, that's something." Nathaniel said nothing. He was looking at Clara. She was looking at the document in her hands, 2 pages clear, and ordered every word chosen for accuracy, rather than effect. She thought about the Whitmore farm. About 17 years old and a stack of creditor letters and 2 seasonal workers who didn't think she could manage it. She thought about a folded letter in a coat pocket. She thought about 9 men. Then she folded the document and put it in her pocket right next to the letter, where the things she had earned belonged. That evening, Back at Carter Ranch, when the house was quiet and Ruth had left coffee on the kitchen table, Nathaniel sat across from Clara and didn't say anything for almost a full minute. She waited him out. She was good at that. "You stood in front of that town today," he said finally. "The same town that watched 9 men walk past you. You stood there and you told them the truth about something complicated, and they listened." "They listened because the documentation was solid," she said. "Clara," he said. She looked at him. "They listened because of you," he said. "Because of who you are when you stand up." She was quiet for a moment. "I spent a long time believing that who I am when I stand up isn't enough for most people," she said. "It's more than enough," he said. "It always was." She held that. "Harmon isn't finished," she said. "He'll recalibrate, find another approach." "Yes," he said. "And when he does, I'd like the person who found the boundary discrepancy before he could act on it to still be here." She looked at him across the table. The coffee between them. The kitchen around them. The vast and indifferent Montana Territory night outside. "Nathaniel," she said. "Yes." "I'm not going anywhere," she said. He looked at her. Something in his expression settled like a man who has been holding a breath for a long time, and finally, with full deliberateness, let it go. "Good," he said quietly. And they drank their coffee in the comfortable silence of two people who have finally, after a great deal of difficulty, arrived in the same place at the same time. Harmon did not disappear. Clara had told Nathaniel he would recalibrate, and she had been right, and she had known she was right the moment she watched him ride out of Silver Creek without a single word. A man who leaves without speaking is not a man who has given up. He is a man who is deciding what to say next and to whom. The recalibration took 11 days. On the 12th morning, Garrett rode in from Helena with a document that changed the shape of everything. Clara was in the office when he arrived. She heard the yard, heard his voice, heard the particular cadence of a man delivering news he has been carrying at speed. She was at the door before he reached it. Garrett did not say good morning. He set a folded document on the desk. "Harmon filed a complaint with the Territorial Land Authority," he said. "Not a boundary claim, a fraud allegation." Clara picked up the document. She read it standing up. The allegation was precise, and it was ugly that Carter Ranch, through the actions of its agent Clara Whitmore, had filed a corrective deed based on fraudulently obtained survey documentation. That the cross-referencing of records used to identify and close the boundary discrepancy had been conducted by a person with no legal standing to access or interpret territorial deed records. That the resulting filing should be invalidated pending a full review. She set the document down. "He's not going after the ranch," she said. "He's going after me." "Specifically you," Garrett confirmed. "The allegation names you by name. It claims you acted without authority, without credentials, and that your involvement in the deed process constitutes an irregular filing." Nathaniel had come in from the yard. He stood in the doorway and looked at Clara's face and then at the document. "Let me read it," he said. She handed it to him. She watched him read it. She watched his expression move through the material the way it always did without rushing, absorbing the full weight before arriving at a response. When he finished, he set it down. "He can't win this," Nathaniel said. "He doesn't need to win it," Garrett said. "He needs it to exist. A formal territorial complaint against the person who organized the public meeting, who built the documentation, who is at the center of Carter Ranch's defense. It introduces uncertainty about the integrity of everything she's touched. It invalidates the timeline document," Clara said. "Even though every fact in it is accurate if there's a formal allegation that I acted without proper authority. Any other operation trying to use our documentation as a foundation for their own defense against Harmon is going to hesitate." Both men looked at her. "He's not just attacking this ranch," she said. "He's attacking the evidence chain. Everything we built together." The room was very still. "What does the Territorial Authority do with a complaint like this?" Nathaniel asked Garrett. "They convene a review hearing," Garrett said. "Clara would need to appear, present her qualifications, the basis for her involvement, the chain of authorization. If the authority finds the complaint has merit, the corrective deed filing goes into a suspended status pending full review." How long? Months, Garrett said. 6 months minimum, during which the boundary question is effectively open again. And Harmon moves on the eastern section during those 6 months, Clara said. With a second filing that references the suspension, Garrett confirmed. The silence in the room had weight. Clara looked at the complaint document on the desk. At her name written in a stranger's formal language framed as a problem to be investigated, rather than a person who had done honest work. She had spent a very long time being framed as a problem. She had spent a very long time watching people decide what she was worth, based on categories she didn't fit. She felt something move through her. Not quite anger. Something deeper than anger. Something that had been building since she was 17 years old, and a creditor had looked at her across a desk and asked whether there was a man he could speak to instead. She picked up the document. She read it again more slowly this time, and then she set it down and looked at Garrett. "When is the hearing?" she said. 3 weeks, he said. "Where Territorial Land Authority Office, Helena." "All right," she said. "Then we have 3 weeks." "Clara," Nathaniel said. She looked at him. "You don't have to do this," he said. "This is my ranch. This is my boundary dispute. Harmon is targeting you because you're the most effective person in this fight. But that doesn't mean you're obligated to stand in front of a territorial authority and defend yourself for work you did honestly." She held his gaze. "Nathaniel," she said, "if I leave this fight now, Harmon wins everything. Not just the land. He wins the argument that a woman without formal credentials had no right to be involved. He wins the precedent that the documentation we built is suspect." She paused. "And every other small operation along that eastern drainage that stood up at that meeting, because they thought someone finally understood what was happening to them, they lose the only organized defense they have." "That's not your responsibility," he said. "No," she said. "It isn't. But it's my choice." He looked at her for a long moment. "What do you need?" he said. "Every document I've touched since I arrived at Carter Ranch," she said. "Every invoice, every deed record, every cross-reference, every wire, every note, every authorization you gave me, verbal or written. I want a complete record of every action I took and on whose authority." "Thomas has copies of everything," Nathaniel said. "He kept them separately from the main filing. I asked him to after the Roy situation." She looked at Thomas, who had appeared silently in the doorway at some point in the last few minutes. "Every document," she said. Thomas nodded once. "Already pulling them," he said. The 3 weeks before the Helena hearing were the hardest working weeks of Clara's life, which was saying something considerable, given the history she had accumulated. She and Garrett built the defense the way she had built everything from the facts outward. No ornamentation, no appeal to sympathy, just the clear and documented record of what had happened, and in what order, and under whose authorization. The authorization question was the center of everything. Harmon's allegation rested on the claim that Clara had acted without proper standing. The defense rested on demonstrating that every action she had taken had been explicitly authorized by Nathaniel Carter, the legal owner of the operation, and that authorization, by an owner to a trusted associate paid or otherwise, was entirely within the bounds of territorial practice. "Is it?" Clara asked Garrett directly one evening when they had been working for 6 hours without stopping. Garrett looked at her over the stack of documents between them. "Technically, yes," he said. "There's no territorial statute requiring that deed-related document preparation be conducted by a licensed attorney or certified land agent. It's been done by ranch managers, family members, business partners for 30 years. But it's never been done by a woman," she said. It was not a question. Garrett was quiet for a moment. "Not in a case that went to formal hearing," he said. "Not in this territory." She absorbed that. "Harmon knows that," she said. "Harmon is counting on it," Garrett said. "Not the legal argument, the atmosphere. A territorial authority of 5 men looking at a woman who is not a wife, not a daughter, not a named business partner, in any formal sense, who inserted herself into a complex land dispute and filed corrective documentation on behalf of a large operation." He paused carefully. "Even if every legal argument goes our way, the atmosphere matters." "What do you recommend?" she said. I recommend we make the legal argument airtight, he said. And we let you be exactly who you are. No softening, no apologizing for your involvement. The moment you hedge on your own right to have done this work, Harmon has his opening. She looked at him. You're more direct than I expected from an attorney, she said. You're more competent than I expected from anyone, he said. And I've been practicing for 20 years. Let's keep working. Nathaniel rode to Helena with her. He had not asked permission, and she had not suggested he shouldn't come. Some things had moved beyond the stage of requiring discussion. They rode with Thomas and 2 other ranch hands, not for intimidation, simply because the territory between Silver Creek and Helena was not a place where a woman and a lawyer traveled alone without reasonable precaution. The ride took a day and a half. On the first evening, stopped for the night at a way station, Nathaniel found Clara sitting outside with the defense documents in her lap, reading through them again in the failing light. He sat beside her. He didn't ask if she was nervous. I understood her well enough by now to know that what she was doing was not nervousness management. She was working. She worked when she was anxious the way other people paced moving through it, by moving through the material, making sure every fact was where she expected it. Tell me what worries you most, he said. She kept her eyes on the document. That the legal argument is perfect and it doesn't matter, she said. Because of the atmosphere, he said. Because I've spent my whole life doing work that was accurate and sound and correct, and watching people decide it counted for less because of who was doing it. She paused. I know how to fight a legal argument. I don't always know how to fight an atmosphere. He was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? He said. She looked at him. The first week you were at Carter Ranch, he said. Thomas told me he thought you were the most capable person who had walked through that office in 5 years of operation. Thomas doesn't say things like that. No, Nathaniel said. He doesn't, which is why I listened. He paused. Ruth told me the second week that she hadn't seen me sit at a dinner table without looking like I was somewhere else in my own head since Eleanor. She said watching me eat dinner looked different. Clara was very still. Henderson told me after the Silver Creek meeting that he had been doing business in this territory for 12 years, and he had never seen a public presentation of that kind of documentation, delivered that clearly by any one man or woman. He paused. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something before you walk into that hearing room tomorrow. What? She said. The atmosphere in that room is already being shaped, he said. Not by Harmon. Not by the 5 men on that authority panel. By you. By everything you've built and every person you've affected since you arrived in Silver Creek. He held her gaze. You don't walk in there as the woman who had no credentials. You walk in there as the person who saved this ranch. She looked at him for a long moment. The night around them was vast and dark and quiet, the way Montana Territory nights always were, uncompromising in their scale, indifferent to individual anxiety, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with comfort. Nathaniel, she said. Yes. When this is over, she said. Whatever the outcome, I need to tell you something that I've been not saying for several weeks. You can tell me now, he said. Not now, she said. After. When it's done and the outcome is what it is. I want to say it without this in front of us. He studied her face. All right, he said. He stood. He looked down at her for a moment. Clara, he said. Whatever those 5 men decide tomorrow, you already won. Harmon came after you specifically because you were the most dangerous person in his way. That's not a complication. That's the measure of what you are. He went inside. She sat with the documents in her lap and the Montana night around her and let that settle. Then she went back to work. The Territorial Land Authority hearing room in Helena held 12 people comfortably. On the morning of the hearing, it held 31. Clara knew before she sat down that the 31 were not all there for the formal proceeding. Garrett had been in Helena for 2 days before they arrived. He had talked to people, and Margaret Falk had apparently talked to more people than Clara had known she was talking to, because Clara recognized 2 of the Eastern Drainage Ranch operators from the Silver Creek meeting sitting in the back row, hats in hands, having ridden to Helena on their own initiative. She did not let herself look at them for more than a moment. She sat at the presentation table with Garrett and looked at the five-man authority panel. 5 men between 60 and 70 years old. Territorial experience written in every line of their faces. Men who had spent careers making decisions about land and rights and the practical architecture of a growing territory. They looked at her. She looked back. Harmon sat across the room with his attorney. He had brought the attorney this time and 2 associates. He caught her eye for a moment. His pleasant expression was intact. He nodded almost courteously. She did not nod back. The authority chairman opened the proceeding with a summary of the complaint. He read Harmon's allegation clearly and completely. Clara listened to her own name used as the subject of a formal fraud allegation and kept her breathing steady and her posture level. When the chairman finished, he looked at Harmon's attorney. The attorney spoke for 20 minutes. He was skilled. Clara acknowledged that internally, with the same unsentimental accuracy she applied to everything. He built the argument cleanly. Clara's lack of formal certification, the absence of any written retainer agreement in the original documentation, the irregularity of a non-attorney preparing materials used in a territorial deed filing. He kept the language procedural and careful. He never said she was a woman out of her depth. He didn't need to. The framing said it without the words. When he finished, the room was quiet. The chairman looked at Garrett. Garrett stood. He was at the table for 7 minutes. He addressed each procedural point directly and dismissed it with specific territorial precedent 3 cases in which ranch associates, family members, and business partners had prepared deed documentation without formal legal credentials, all accepted without question by the same territorial authority. He cited the statutes. He cited the dates. He was precise and brief and completely without drama. Then he said, "The authority should hear from Miss Whitmore directly." Clara stood. She had the 2-page summary document in her hand. The same kind of document she had been writing since she was 17. Clear. Ordered. Every word chosen for accuracy. She set it on the table. She did not look at it again. She looked at the 5 men on the panel, and she spoke from what she knew. She described arriving at Carter Ranch. The specific authorization Nathaniel Carter had given her verbal later confirmed in writing, which Garrett had in the record. She described the invoice discrepancy and how she found it. The boundary issue and how she identified it. Every action she had taken and the explicit authorization under which she had taken it. The corrective deed filing and the 40-minute margin that had protected the ranch. She spoke for 12 minutes. She did not apologize for her involvement. She did not hedge her right to have done the work. She did not make herself smaller to fit a room that had not been designed with her in mind. When she finished, the chairman looked at her for a long moment. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "the allegation characterizes your involvement in this filing as irregular. In your view, what was the basis of your authority to act?" "The explicit direction of the property owner," she said. "Nathaniel Carter authorized every action I took. He is the legal owner of Carter Ranch. His authorization is sufficient under territorial practice. The question of my personal credentials is separate from and subordinate to the question of whether the property owner had the right to direct the preparation of his own deed documentation. And in your professional judgment, was the corrective deed filing accurate?" "It was accurate," she said. "Every measurement, every date, every reference. The documentation is in the record. The authority can verify each element independently." The chairman looked at the other 4 panel members. A brief, quiet exchange. Then he looked at Harmon's attorney. "Counselor," he said, "the territorial statutes cited by Mr. Garrett are accurate. The precedents are established. The authorization record is complete." He paused. "What specific legal basis does your client's complaint rest on that distinguishes this filing from those precedents?" The attorney spoke for 3 minutes. It was 3 minutes of very skilled arrangement of insufficient material. Clara could hear it. She thought the panel could hear it too. When the attorney finished, the chairman folded his hands on the table. "The panel will take a 30-minute recess," he said. Clara sat with Garrett in the hallway outside the hearing room. She did not pace. She sat with her hands flat on her knees and looked at the wall across from her. Nathaniel sat beside her. He had not spoken during the proceeding. He was not a party to it. His role was witness if called, and he had not been called. but he had been there the entire time in the third row present, in the way she had come to recognize as specific to him, not performing support, not signaling anything to anyone, simply being there with his full attention, committed to what was happening. "You were extraordinary," he said quietly. "The panel hasn't ruled yet," she said. "I'm not talking about the ruling," he said. She looked at him. "You stood up in that room," he said, "in front of a formal authority with a fraud allegation against you, and you were completely yourself. Not a version of yourself, not a managed presentation. You." She held his gaze. "I've been practicing," she said. "For how long?" 27 years, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Something passed between them. Something that had been building since the first morning in Silver Creek when he had walked past 11 women on a platform and stopped in front of the one at the end of the line. "Clara," he said. "Wait," she said. "Let me say the thing I said I'd say after." He was quiet. "I didn't come to Silver Creek looking for rescue," she said. "I came looking for someone who could see the whole of who I am without requiring me to make myself smaller. I said that to you very early. You remember." "I remember everything you've said to me," he said. She pressed her hands flat against her knees. "I've been trying to be careful," she said. "Not to decide how I feel about you too quickly. Not to mistake gratitude for something else, or relief for something else. I've spent 3 months being methodical about it, because I've learned that my judgment is reliable when I'm methodical and sometimes wrong when I'm not." "And," he said. "And I'm certain," she said. "That's what I wanted to tell you. When I'm certain of something I say so directly. I'm certain." He looked at her for a long moment. "Clara," he said, "I knew what I was choosing when I walked past 11 women and stopped in front of you. I wasn't certain of much else that morning. I was certain of that." "You didn't know me," she said. "No," he said. "But I knew what I was looking for, and I recognized it." She held that. "You chose yourself first," he said. 9 times, 10 times you went back to that platform and you chose to keep believing you were worth what you were looking for. That's what I saw. And that is why I knew I could trust my heart with yours." The hallway was very quiet. From behind the closed hearing room door, the muffled sound of the panel in consultation. She reached across and set her hand over his. It was the first time she had done that. He turned his hand over and held hers. They sat that way when the door opened and the chairman appeared in the hallway. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "Mr. Carter, Mr. Garrett, the panel is ready." The panel dismissed the complaint unanimously. The chairman read the finding in 4 sentences. The filing was valid. The authorization was sufficient. The documentation was accurate. The complaint was without legal merit and was dismissed with a formal notation that the allegation had been found to lack foundation. Harmon's attorney said nothing. Harmon himself sat very still in his chair and looked at the far wall with the expression of a man recalculating again. This time, Clara thought there was less left to recalculate with. After the formal close of the proceeding, while Garrett was receiving his copies of the ruling, Margaret Falk appeared from the back of the room and took Clara's hand in both of hers. "Peter Oldham lost his ranch," she said. "He didn't have someone like you." Clara looked at her. "He's going to have a harder time doing this again," Clara said. "To anyone." "Because of what you did today," Margaret said. "Because of what everyone along that eastern drainage did," Clara said. "You rode 2 hours to tell me about Oldham. Those men rode to Helena this morning without being asked. That's what changed the room." Margaret Falk looked at her steadily. "Come see me sometime," she said. "The Falk Quarter. You'd be welcome any time." "I will," Clara said, and she meant it. Garrett filed a separate complaint with the Federal Land Authority on the ride home, or rather he dictated it to Clara, who wrote it on the basis that her documentation of the pattern across the eastern drainage corridor constituted exactly the kind of coordinated scheme that Federal Land Authority was designed to address. It named Gerald Harmon specifically. It cited 5 properties including Carter Ranch and the Oldham parcel. It was 31 pages. Clara wrote it in the saddle at way stations by lantern light on the second night of the return journey, and finished the final page, sitting at the Carter Ranch office desk at 7 in the morning of the third day. She signed her name at the bottom as the preparer, without hesitation. Garrett signed as the filing attorney. Nathaniel signed as the primary complainant. Then Thomas rode to the Helena telegraph office with the full document and Garrett's instructions, and it was done.
Bunhag.
3 months later, the Federal Land Authority opened a formal investigation into Gerald Harmon's acquisition pattern across the eastern Montana drainage corridor. Garrett wrote to Clara with the news on a Wednesday morning in early November. She read the letter at the kitchen table while Ruth was making breakfast, and Nathaniel was in the office going over the winter supply numbers. Numbers that were for the first time in at least 2 years completely accurate. She read the letter twice. Then she set it on this table and looked at nothing in particular for a moment. Ruth set a plate in front of her without comment. "Good news," Ruth said. "Yes," Clara said. Ruth nodded and went back to the stove. Clara picked up her fork. Then Nathaniel appeared in the kitchen doorway with 2 pages of supply numbers in one hand and his coffee in the other, and looked at the letter on the table and then at her face. "Garrett," he said. "Federal investigation opened," she said. "Harmon, full drainage corridor review." He set the supply numbers down on the table. He looked at her. "Peter Aldham," she said. "And however many came before him, they might get something back." "Because of what you built," he said. "Because of what we built," she said. He sat down across from her. He looked at her in the way she had stopped being surprised by that full, direct, storm-gray attention that saw her completely and required nothing different from what she actually was. "Clara Whitmore," he said. "Yes, I'd like to marry you," he said. "Not because this ranch needs you, though it does. Not because I'm a 42-year-old widower who has been lonely for 6 years, though both of those things are true. Because you are the most honest, capable, courageous person I have ever known. And I would like to spend the rest of my life in the same place as you." She looked at him across the kitchen table, the coffee between them. Ruth at the stove pretending not to hear anything. The supply numbers beside the letter from Garrett. The November light coming through the window carrying the particular quality of a season that is settling in for the long work of winter. All of it ordinary. All of it exactly right. "Yes," she said. He let out a breath. Ruth at the stove made no sound whatsoever, but her shoulders moved in a way that communicated profound satisfaction. "That's all," he said. "Just yes." "You asked a direct question," she said. "I gave you an honest answer. That's the only kind I have." He looked at her, the private smile, the real one. "Yes," he said. "It is." They were married in Silver Creek on a Saturday in December, in the same town where Clara Whitmore had stood on a platform 10 times and been told in various ways that she was not what anyone was looking for. The same town watched her walk across it now as a different kind of woman. Not softer, not easier, not changed in any of the ways the town had once seemed to require. The same direct bearing, the same clear eyes, the same complete absence of apology for occupying the space she occupied. Henderson was there. Margaret Falk had ridden in from the Falk Quarter. Thomas stood at the back of the gathering in his ordinary working clothes and watched the proceedings with the expression of a man who considers this outcome to have been self-evident for some time. Even Mr. Fitch, the nervous man from the bride placement office with his ink-stained fingers, was there standing near the edge of the crowd with the particular expression of a man who understands that he witnessed something important without fully understanding it at the time. Nathaniel Carter stood at the front and watched Clara come toward him. He did not look like a man who had acquired something. He looked like a man who had recognized something. There is a difference. Clara had known the difference for a long time. She reached him. He took her hand. The folded letter was not in her pocket that day. It was in the top drawer of the office desk at Carter Ranch where it would stay, not because it had ceased to matter, but because it had done its work. It had carried her from the Whitmore farm through 10 appearances on a Silver Creek platform, to the morning when a man in a dark coat rode down Main Street looking for something specific and found her at the end of a line. It had carried her far enough. From here, she was carrying herself. She looked at Nathaniel Carter, who had not chosen her because nobody else did, who had not chosen her out of practicality or loneliness, or the desire for a useful arrangement. Who had looked across a crowded platform and recognized in a woman with a worn suitcase and a folded letter and 9 rejections behind her the person he had been looking for. Not because she was perfect, because she was real, because she had chosen herself first and kept choosing herself through every morning she went back to that platform and every night she sat alone and wondered if the thing she was looking for actually existed. It existed. It had always existed. She had just needed to stay standing long enough to find it. And on a cold December morning in Silver Creek, Montana Territory, in the winter of 1886, Clara Whitmore, who had been rejected 9 times, who had managed a farm alone at 17, who had dismantled a financial fraud and defeated a land scheme and stood before a territorial authority and said her name without flinching, became Clara Carter. Not because a man finally chose her, because she had never stopped choosing herself. And that made all the difference.